He had always loved her legs. She used very minimal makeup, just wanting to highlight her eyes. She wore her hair loose, surprised at how long it had grown. She wore no jewelry except her engagement ring and wedding band, and a small diamond necklace he had bought her the first year we were together. Beverly was shaking a bit when she pulled into his drive. It was the first time she had seen the house, and she was surprised at how big it was. Why would an almost single man, childless, need such a big house? It gave off an air of old-fashioned charm, from the graveled paths to the porch swing on the wraparound porch, where several people were gathered. They looked at Beverly curiously as she walked to the door, wondering who she was. She was just about to knock when it swung open. There he was. His eyes widened with surprise. It had been 10 weeks since they'd laid eyes on each other. Before he could speak, she rushed out what she had planned to say. "Hello, Dave. Please don't be upset. Susan invited me and I wanted very badly to see you. If you don't want me here, I'll go, but please, can I stay?" He stood for a moment before grinning. "Come in, Beverly. I'd like to show you my house, and sometime later I think we need to talk, don't you?" He reached out, and she locked down on his hand like it was the only thing on this earth that would keep her from floating away. He flinched, but didn't pull back. He introduced her around, and Minnie seemed surprised to hear he was married. She glanced down and breathed a sigh of relief to see his band still on his finger. Maybe there was hope for them yet. She finally let go when Susan dragged her away to gossip. They whispered war plans to each other, and Susan gave Beverly a hug with encouraging words. "You've got him a little off balance right now. Keep him that way. Don't give him time to think about the past. Keep him in the moment and his eyes on you. Be as affectionate as he will allow, but if you sense reluctance, back off. You need to get him used to you again. Understand?" Beverly found it very sage advice and promised her. She went looking and found him out back. He had a massive yard, easily 4 times the land at her house, and it was meticulously groomed. His building stood shining under a fresh coat of paint and a new tin roof to match the house. When she saw him, she just stopped and observed. He came out of the building carrying an elaborate bird feeder in one arm and a small girl, 3 or 4, in the other. She was hugging his neck, giggling and raining kisses on his cheeks. He was smiling, and it suddenly hit Beverly like a knife through the heart. She would never be able to give him kids, now, at their age. It dawned on her how selfish she'd been. Career had superseded family, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it now. Beverly forced her mind to clear. In order to keep him in the moment, she had to stay in the moment. There was always adoption if they got back together. Her mind was clear now, the fog of power and arrogance washed away. If he still wanted a family, they would find an age-appropriate child and adopt. Maybe more than one. "Who's your girlfriend, honey?" She didn't know if he caught the honey, but he smiled. "This beautiful young woman is Ari. We're good friends. I'm a little too old for her, but when she grows up, I see more than one broken heart in her wake." He set her down. "Ari, do you think you can carry this by yourself? If not, I'm going to put it on the table here, and you can get your sister to help you. And I didn't forget my promise. I'll be over tomorrow to put it up for you." She said hello to Beverly in a breathless little girl voice that made you just want to hug her to death, and toddled over to a stunning young woman, babbling excitedly and tugging on her hand. They approached Beverly and Dave, smiling. "Thank you, Dave. You don't know what it means to her. She's watches the birdhouse you gave her for hours, and was thrilled when a bluebird family took up residence. Plus, she's almost worn out the bird book you gave her. I had to read the names to her, and she's committed them to memory. We'll be going down the road and she'll name them off. Robin, Bluebird, English Sparrow, Crow. Her preschool is so impressed they've organized a visit to the local aviary. She wants you to come, too, if you can get off from work. We'll see. If I can spare the time, I'd love to. I should probably go. She'll be so wired it'll take both of us to wrangle her." The woman looked like she was still in her teens. To use the common term, the girl was built and wasn't averse to flaunting it. Her shorts weren't quite Daisy Dukes, and her halter top was modest, but it did nothing to mask the physical appeal. She also had the prettiest set of lips Beverly had ever seen. She nearly lost it when the woman put her hand on his arm and stood on tiptoes to kiss him. He glowed red, and Beverly was furious to see her lipstick on his cheek. The woman grinned at her, and Beverly knew she was being baited. "You must be his wife." "I'm sorry, but after a while, we all thought you were fictional." "I'm Marcia. Dave and I are neighbors." It took every bit of self-control Beverly had not to slap the smirk off her face. "Oh, I'm very much alive. I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot more of me from now on." They stared at each other until she smiled and sauntered off, putting a little extra swish in her shorts as she strode away. Beverly turned to Dave, pissed, ready to rail, and was stopped cold by a smirk. "Draw your claws in, hon. She's just turned 18. Her parents were druggies, and one day they got hold of a bad batch and overdosed. She's living with her grandfather now, and frankly, he has no idea what to do with her. I like her, and I adore her little sister. Besides, it bothers you how, exactly? You haven't contacted me in 11 weeks, and had precious little to say for the 2 years before. I just assumed you wrote me off as a bad business decision and moved on." Beverly opened her mouth to say what? Instead, she just burst into tears and walked off. Damn him, why did he always equate everything to business? Of course she knew the answer, but couldn't face it. Susan swept in, eyes shooting lasers at Dave, and herded Beverly into the bathroom so she could compose herself. Even as she snuffled, she admired the huge whirlpool tub, wondering how it would be to soak in it, especially with Dave in there with her. She took a few minutes, but she got her composure back, especially when she remembered he called her hon, something he hadn't done in. Well, she couldn't remember, but it had been a while. She said as much to Susan. She asked, and Susan told her he had finally stopped holding his feelings in, but she took that as a good sign. "I kind of deserved what he said, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. I came here to try and rekindle my marriage, and tucking my tail and running isn't a good start. So, Susan, stay out of it, no matter what gets said. This is like heavyweight boxing, so I'm going to take my lumps and keep swinging. Maybe I'll get lucky. Or maybe you'll get knocked on your butt. Hang in there, honey, and if you start losing too badly, swing below the belt. Either way, you'll get his attention." Composed, Beverly went back to the party to find Dave sitting at a table with an older gentleman, Ari firmly planted in his lap. He started to stand, but she told him not to, taking a seat beside him. Ari looked at Beverly for a few minutes before reaching out and touching her pendant. The older gentleman spoke. "Ari, stop. Don't bother the nice lady." Beverly thought she shocked both of them when she held out her arms and Ari scooted over. "Do you like it? Dave got it for me, a long time ago. It's one of my favorite things in the world. Pretty." "Yes, it is, baby. Maybe someday, in the future, some nice young man who means as much to you as Dave means to me will give you one. If he does, cherish it. Remember every time you look at it or wear it who gave it to you, and why. Now, if you promise to be really careful, you can wear it for a bit. Can you do that? Promise." Her little girl eyes looked up at Beverly, a solemn expression on her face. "I promise." Bev slid her up on the table facing her, turning her back to Dave. "Honey, a little help here." He seemed lost, not sure what to say. "Beverly, you don't." "Nonsense. She already promised to take care of it, right, precious?" "Uh-huh." Beverly felt his hand shake while she enjoyed his fingers on her neck, the most intimate touch they'd shared in months. She gently placed it around the little girl's neck as she giggled and cooed. She carried her into the hall, putting her in front of a large mirror so she could see herself. Ari clapped her hands in joy, which made Beverly smile. It took so little to make a child happy, sometimes. After that, she stuck to Beverly like glue, leaving every so often to check on her sister, who was enjoying the attention of one of the young men from Dave's office. They were on his front porch, in rockers, so she gently rocked and sang her a song her mother used to sing to her. She felt eyes and looked up. Dave was staring, and tears were visible in his eyes. He turned abruptly, walking into the house. She couldn't very well chase him with a sleeping child in her arms, so she continued to rock. A few minutes later, he was back, reaching down to get her. "Come on, let's put her in a bedroom for her nap. She'll be awake in a little, full of energy." Beverly followed him into a bedroom, where he laid Ari down, covering her with a light blanket. Won't it scare her to wake up alone? No. She knows where she is. As soon as she wakes, though, she'll let us know. They stood, looking down at the sleeping angel, almost touching. He turned to go, and Beverly grabbed him, pulling his head down to hers, and kissed him. Not a little peck either, but a full-blown kiss full of passion. He started a little, then kissed her back, giving just as good as he got. When he finally pulled back, questions in his eyes, Beverly put a finger to his lips. "Don't think. Enjoy." Then she kissed him again before pulling back and leading him out of the room. It was enough, for now. Marcia met them on the back deck, questions in her eyes. "She's asleep, honey. We tucked her in, and she looks to be out for a while." She looked at Beverly oddly. "Thank you. You've been really nice to her. She doesn't get that much." "Odd, really. Dave told me you didn't like kids." Flames must have been pulsing out of her eyes. How dare he share such an intimate bit of information? Before she could blow up, he spoke. That's not necessarily true, Marcia. I said she didn't want children of her own. She seems to get along fine with what few we've been around. Oh, said Marcia. Why didn't you want kids? Marcia, mind your manners. You don't know this woman well enough to ask such personal questions. Leave it alone. Marcia was immediately contrite. Apparently Dave was important to her. Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Something about the way she suddenly looked so young and helpless touched Beverly, so she hugged her unexpectedly. Hush, baby, it's all right. I know you didn't mean anything, so there's no harm done. Come on, let's get those tears dried and fix you up a little. Dave stood with his jaw hanging as Beverly led her away, back to the infamous bathroom. It was sure getting a lot of use today. She got a cloth and towel and gently patted her face dry, saying soothing words to calm her down. Marcia hugged her like she was afraid to let go. When she finally calmed down, Beverly had her wash her face, envying the smooth skin of youth. She wore no makeup, her hair in a simple ponytail. I'm all right now. We can go back now. Let's give it a minute. Let your ponytail down, and I'll straighten it a little. Marcia obeyed Beverly like a child, and she sat her in front of the mirror, straightening out her tangles. Without thinking, Beverly started redoing Marcia's hair, putting it in an elaborate braid. It made her even more attractive. Determining to go farther, she used a bit of blush, a hint of mascara, and a light pink lipstick on her. Marcia sat silently, her eyes getting bigger as she watched herself transform. When Beverly was done, she would have looked comfortable on the cover of any teen magazine. Wow, just wow. What did you do to me? Beverly saw her lips start to quiver. Stop. You'll make your mascara run. I didn't do anything, child. It was there the whole time. You're a diamond, baby. You just needed a little polishing. Now, let's go back and knock them dead. That young man you were talking to will wish he'd spent more time with you. I'll bet. Conversation almost stopped when they returned, and it wasn't long until there was more than one man vying for Marcia's attention. Beverly returned to Dave, standing beside him as he manned the grill. Were we ever that young? He smiled a bittersweet smile. If we were, I can't remember it. It makes you feel good, doesn't it, watching the Ian's old mating dance? It does. And even if you don't, I do. One memory forever enshrined in my heart is the first time I kissed you. We were, what, 19? I was still a virgin then. Boy, we sure got over that quick, didn't we? I think I knew after the first date we were destined to be together. What happened to us? Life happened. We grew up. Our priorities changed. Suddenly, the thought of ducking out of work and spending the day playing wasn't as important as making a meeting or coming in early to beat the competition, so you'd have a leg up when promotion time came along. Or you couldn't go on a spontaneous road trip because you had things left over from the week before and needed to finish them and start on the new week so you'd gain ground. Good or bad, Beverly, we grew up, and now we're growing old. He stopped suddenly, but she knew what he was thinking. They were growing old, and not together. She had to derail that train fast. Will you show me your garden? He smiled and led her over. It was a lot larger than she thought it would be. It was just like him, though, neat and orderly, teeming with plants. She had no idea what most were, and he named them off for her. Black Krim, Rutgers, and Yellow Boy tomatoes. Stray neck and spaghetti squash, Italian gray zucchini. French purple pole beans, butter beans, and bush stringless beans. Poblano and Cubanelle peppers. The flowers, especially the marigolds, are natural pest deterrents, and the mulch is to help retain moisture and enrich the soil. It almost completely eliminates having to hoe weeds. Ari popped up, done with her nap. She tugged on his pants leg, and he picked her up without a second thought. Pick, she said, pointing to a bright yellow tomato. Dave carried her over, set her down gently, and Beverly was surprised when the little girl took hold of the tomato and twisted carefully until it came off in her hand. She held it up to Beverly. Eat. Dave laughed. She wants you to wash it, so she can have a sandwich. I've taught her not to eat anything until it's washed. I use organic pesticides, but they're still pesticides, and I want to be safe. Good idea. She held out her hands and Ari toddled over. She hugged her as they walked, her back turned to Dave so he couldn't see the moisture in her eyes. Her maternal instincts she wasn't even aware she had, were surging strongly. Marcia came over, but Ari refused to leave Beverly's arms. Well, all right then. I'll help Mr. Dave plate the food. When she gets her sandwich, bring her outside. I'll save you a seat. She walked off smiling. Beverly washed the tomato thoroughly, found the bread and mayo, sliced it, and built Ari her sandwich. She sat and watched, telling her to put more tomato until the whole thing was on the sandwich. This is going to be messy, Beverly thought as she carried the plate back outside, Ari holding onto her sundress. Marcia had saved a spot between her and Dave, and Ari spent her time going from one lap to another. She ate half the sandwich, half a buttered ear of corn, and half a hot dog. It was still a lot of food for a little girl. Beverly was right. It was messy, and Marcia had to take her for a change of clothes. They sat under the party lights he had placed in the trees, watching the sun go down. She was surprised to see there was no alcohol. Dave told her privately it was because Marcia's grandfather was a recovering alcoholic. He left shortly after, though, and Dave pulled a cooler full of beer out, along with 4 bottles of wine. Not enough to get smashed for the amount of people, but enough to give everyone a pleasant glow. He had music playing, speakers situated around the patio, surrounding them with gentle instrumentals and languid love songs. Beverly snuggled into Dave, hoping for the best, and he responded by putting his arm around her. She almost cried with happiness. Marcia and one of her admirers, along with Sol and Susan, were dancing, swaying together across the grass. Young love and old, connecting in the soft lights. The music changed, a love ballad popular when they were in college. They had danced many a slow dance to that tune. Dave stood, pulling her along. Beverly had just enough time to kick off her sandals. Then she was in his arms and 21 all over again. She held him as tightly as she could and soaked his shirt with her tears. One hand reached up to push her hair back and caress her cheek. They stayed together for a few minutes after the song ended. She stepped back, noticing Susan was standing with her mouth open while Marcia grinned. The tears started again, and soon they were in a 3-way hug, all of them sniffling, which led to another trip to the bathroom. This was getting to be a habit. She started to fix her makeup one more time, thought better of it, and washed her face. The people left, thanking Dave for the evening. Marcia hugged them both tightly. She had a sad face when she pulled back. "What's the matter, baby?" Beverly asked. I wish you guys had been my parents. Maybe I would have the love I deserved, the love Ari is going to need. I'm scared, real scared. Now that I'm 18, the support check for me will stop coming. Ari will still get one, but it isn't much. Gramps is already uncomfortable with us being there. If the money dries up, he'll kick us out. Beverly was shocked beyond words, and Dave had an expression on his face she hoped she would never see again. Marcia, I want you to listen to me. I'm right next door. If things get bad, you come here immediately. Immediately. Understand? If I'm not here, lock the doors and call us. One or the other, we will be here for you. And Ari, say you understand. Beverly watched, shocked, wondering what kind of hell their life had been. Snapping out of it, she hugged her again. She gave Marcia her card and scribbled her private number on the back. Save this. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call. You understand. She was crying again and took turns clinging to them. When she finally composed herself, she left, a sad, slow walk until she was out of sight. Dave walked over to the porch swing, lost in thought. Beverly sat down beside him and took his hand. She may have been the big bad CEO, but when things really got rough, one could depend on Dave to take care of it. What are we going to do? About what? He asked, coming out of his reverie. About the girls. We can't leave them in a situation like that. What do you suggest we do? I'd take them in a heartbeat if I could. Why don't you? I don't know how it would work. She's 18 now, Beverly said. She's legally an adult, so she can live where she wants. Since she is legally an adult, she can petition the courts for full custody of Ari. I'm sure the grandfather would go along with it just to get rid of them if what she says is true. Here's what we do. I'll take charge of the legal stuff. That's my strong suit. Yours is sales, so you need to sell her on the idea of being an adult and doing what's best for both of them. Wouldn't it look bad? A single older man taking a young woman and child in? That stung. Beverly finally let some of her temper loose. You listen to me, Dave Waxman. You are not a single man. You have a wife, and she is not inclined to be referred to as the former Mrs. Waxman. It took all of this to wake me up, Dave, and I intend to never sleep again. I've missed you so badly, honey. But introspection has led me to understand that what happened is all on me. I took you for granted for so long that I got used to it. I got bad advice, went a little power mad, and screwed my life up in ways I could never imagine. Tonight was the first step on my way back to you. Do you still love me? It took everything she had to ask that question, and she was scared to death of the answer. He looked thoughtful, and it filled her with dread. I love the you I fell in love with. not the you that you've become. If we manage to start again, things will have to be a lot different. I'm not asking you to be submissive, Beverly, but I would insist on you acknowledging me as an equal that deserves your respect and a good bit more than the time you've given me for the last few years. I woke up after I left. I have no desire at all to go back to that life, and I'm damn sure never stepping foot in that house again. I need to know in my heart that if the situation ever arises, you would pick me over the business every time. Honestly, I don't think you can do it. Beverly was crying, despite her best efforts not to, and he took her hand. Honey, all that being said, I'd really like to try again. I miss not waking up beside you, the affectionate gestures we used to share before you got too important. There are a few things we need to do, though. The first is to find a competent marriage counselor who can guide us back to each other. We need to set some ground rules on how we allocate our efforts, making sure there's always time for each other. Does this sound reasonable to you? Would you be willing to live here, in this house, if we get back together? It was too much. He wanted to save their marriage. He still loved her. She broke down, sobbing hysterically for at least 5 minutes while he held her, gently stroking her back. Eventually, she got herself together enough to answer him. He waited, wondering if she understood what he told her. He'd never accept second billing ever again. If she wanted to stay married, it had to be to him, not the job. Honestly, he didn't think she could do it. She really surprised him with her answer. I agree to almost all of it. I'm not worried about the house. It's nice, but without you there it may as well be a box under an overpass. I'm sure the commute will suck until I get used to it, but if it helps save my marriage, I'll get over it pretty quickly. She sighed. I lost direction, honey, and I want to find my way back home. I need a guide, and I'm depending on you. The counselor is a really good idea. Do you want to find one, or shall I? We'll both have to agree, of course, before we commit. It was a few minutes before she could go on, crying into his shoulder. She finally pulled back, wiping her eyes. One of our first priorities should be to re-establish our intimacy. I know it's probably too soon for sharing a bed, but can I stay here tonight? I really need to wake up in the same house as you. As far as priorities, you are my main focus right now. I still have to work. Thanks to my blunder, I'm not in a very good position, so I have to really put effort into everything I do, but I will make sure I'm home at a reasonable hour. If something comes up that I absolutely can't walk away from, I'll call immediately. I'm willing to put forth maximum effort to ensure this never happens again. He believed her, conditionally. Truth be told, once he got over the hurt that she had caused him, old feelings had started back. Most of their adult lives were entwined, and at the end of the day, he decided he didn't want to break them. He was serious about a counselor. If ever a couple needed professional help, it was them. She was saying all the right words, and he was curious to see if she meant them. All right, you can have the room Ari took her nap in. It has its own private bath, and if you need something to sleep in, we'll find you a shirt. Agreed. She surprised him by shaking her head. No. I saw that big whirlpool tub in the master bath. I've been carrying around a load of tension lately, and I think soaking in it would do me a world of good. Soon he heard her in the tub, singing softly. She had a really good voice, and he tried to remember the last time he'd heard her sing. He couldn't, so it must have been a really long time ago. It was one of her tells. She always felt extra happy when she sang. 40 minutes later, she came out wearing a t-shirt that barely covered her bottom. Bev caught him looking and grinned, flipping it up as she exited the room. He stood in shock at the sight of her bare butt, listening to her giggles fade down the hall. High eyes flew open, and the first thing he looked at was the clock. 2:30 in the morning. There was just enough moonlight to see her standing at the end of the bed. Bev. High eyes flew open, and the first thing he looked at was the clock. 2:30 in the morning. There was just enough moonlight to see her standing at the end of the bed. Bev. I couldn't sleep, knowing you were in the same house and not in the same bed. Can I please, sleep with you? That's all I want, just to snuggle and feel your arms around me. Please, Dave. He could have been an a-hole and sent her back down the hall. He could have done a number of other things, but he pulled back the covers. She slid in, and he felt her trembling. Wrapping his arms around her, he pulled her tightly to him. He felt the tears, but said nothing. Very soon afterward, he heard her breathing level out and knew she was asleep. He lay awake for a long time, wondering about their future, before drifting off with a smile on his face. Her eyes popped open, and she wondered what hotel room she was in. Then she felt his arms around her, and it all came rushing back. She was in bed with her husband. She was about to get intimate when a bundle of energy came rushing in. Mr. Dave, wake up. Marcia stood at the door with her hands over her mouth. I'm so sorry. I told her to stay downstairs, but as soon as my back was turned, she took off. Dave grinned, tickling Ari softly. She wriggled and cooed, loving every minute of it. It's all right, Marcia. Now I have two beauties in my bed. How lucky can a man be? Beverly saw Marcia's expression, and I knew something wasn't right. What's wrong, honey? Gramps hasn't gone grocery shopping lately. I was going to ask if I could give some of your cereal to Ari. She could tell Marcia was embarrassed beyond words. Beverly's heart went out to her. She doesn't need cereal, honey. She needs a good breakfast. Give us a minute to get dressed, and we'll come down and fix something, or take you out if he doesn't have enough. All right? Marcia couldn't talk. She just nodded and gathered up a squirming Ari. Come on, Ari. Let's get you some juice while Mr. Dave and Mrs. Beverly get dressed. As soon as the door closed, Beverly whirled around, eyes blazing. I'm sorry, honey. I was hoping for some long overdue loving, but it can wait. Really, what kind of man doesn't make sure there's enough food in the house for his children? Where's your robe? She snatched it off the closet hook and was out the door. Dave followed a little more slowly after answering the call of nature. She was in the kitchen with all of the cupboards open, frowning. Dave was about to explain that, as a single guy, there was not much of a need to keep a stocked larder, but he thought better of it. Beverly didn't give him a chance, marching out to her car and getting the bag, as Dave always called it. One day, she was at a business luncheon and a vendor spilled red wine all over her light blue dress. She had to excuse herself, drive home, and change. After that, there was always a bag in her trunk that contained at least 2 outfits. Choosing the most casual dress, she was back, telling Dave to get his butt in gear. They had children to feed. A very quick shower and shave later, Dave was waiting by the door. Bev was almost as fast, and he couldn't help but admire her. She always chose tasteful clothes, but was not adverse to showing off her toned body. They almost didn't go out for breakfast when Beverly found out there was no car seat for Ari, but when Dave told her that they were less than half a mile from a really nice breakfast buffet, she decided to sit in the back with Ari until they got there. The girls consumed mass quantities. He looked at Bev and knew she had the same thought. These children were missing meals. Her eyes were dark with anger, and Ari asked if he was mad at her. Dave straightened his face and told her he was because she had eaten the last pancake. Then he grinned and told her it was a good thing that they could always get more. There was a mall across the road, and in a tone that brooked no argument, Bev told Dave to pull into its lot. They were there for 2 hours. First, she went to a department store and bought the best car seat they had, banishing him out to the parking lot to put it in. By the time he got back, they were in full shopping mode. Bev made sure they both got 3 outfits apiece. Ari loved it, but Marcia seemed embarrassed. Bev gently hugged her. Please let me do this. We never had children, and just once I want to pretend I'm out with my daughters doing mother-daughter stuff. Ari got bored pretty quickly, so Dave walked her around while Marcia and Beverly finished up. Their last stop was a grocery store, and Ari rode as Dave pushed, while Bev and Marcia discussed everything that they picked up like they were going to use it to cook the Last Supper. Ari contributed by putting everything she could reach in the buggy, especially while they were in the snack aisle. Beverly started to put some of them back, but Ari made big eyes at her and she left them. It was a quiet ride home. They were unloading the groceries when Beverly suddenly asked, "How many bedrooms do we have?" Dave found it very interesting when she said, "We. 4. Why?" She just rolled her eyes, took the girls, and went upstairs. 10 minutes later, she called him. Dave found them standing in the biggest guest room, the one with the attached bath. This is the girls' room. It belongs to them now. It will be their sanctuary if things go bad. You need to make sure Marcia has keys so she can come over anytime. Understand? Marcia was standing there waffling between hopeful and scared. Ari was in Beverly's arms, almost asleep. Bev had that determined CEO look on her face. When he didn't say anything, he saw her start to tremble. Then he grinned. Well, so it shall be. I leave it to you girls to decorate it. He turned to Marcia. You understand what we're offering you? As an answer, she flew into his arms and cried her heart out. Bev put a sleeping Ari down and joined the hug. He left them a few minutes later, going into the living room to sit on his favorite recliner. He tried to understand how his life had changed so much in the last 24 hours. Beverly came down a few minutes later, surprising him by joining him on his oversized recliner. Once she got comfortable, she started talking softly while gently stroking his chest. This changes everything, doesn't it? I'm going back to the old house to pack what I need. I'm taking Marcia with me to help, so you're Onda. her childcare duties until we get back. Do not feed her junk, understand? Feed her something light to hold her until dinner. We'll be back in 3 hours. She stood, then stopped, bending down to kiss him. He could see the fear in her eyes as she spoke. That is, if you want me back. He stood and hugged her. We have a lot of issues to resolve, honey. Living apart from each other is not going to help solve them. You are always better at organizing things, so I'll leave it to you. This probably won't be easy, but I love you enough to try. Are you in? Was she in? What a stupid question. She was about to use every metaphor in the English language before she caught herself and smiled through her tears. I'm in. His smile gave her a lot of comfort. She grabbed Marcia from upstairs and hustled her out the door. She was quiet for a while before she asked a question. Why are you doing this? Helping us. She thought carefully before she answered. If they were to have any kind of relationship, she didn't want to start it off by lying to her. First and foremost, I'm doing it because I like you and honestly want to help you. You're in a situation not of your own doing, alone and with a small child. What decent human being wouldn't want to help you? Secondly, you seem to be important to Dave, and by extension to me. You know we were separated. This weekend is hopefully the first step of a long journey home. She stopped for a second to gather her thoughts. One of the things I discovered while we were separated was that Dave really wanted children, and I was selfish enough to deny it to him. Then I met you and Ari, and emotions I didn't even know I had came surging out of me. Now, I bitterly regret my decision not to give him children. You girls are my do-over. I'll never be your mother, but I'd like to be the best mother figure I can be to you and Ari, no matter what happens between Dave and me. You probably don't understand, but I would honestly like to try. May I? Tears glistened in her eyes, and then she reached over and took Bev's hand. Well, then, you can count me in on your campaign to get Dave back. After all, for a perfect family, both parental units have to be present, right? Beverly had to pull over. Marcia held her while she cried and she reveled in her touch. When she finally got herself together, she let her loose, kissing her softly on her cheek. Thank you, baby. When she called her baby, she started sniffling, so they hugged again. She hit her with a bombshell. To truly be my daughter, you need to live with us full-time. Now that you're 18, you can petition the courts to transfer custody of Ari to you. We'll pay for all the legal fees if you agree. It should be pretty simple, and when we're done, no one can take her away from us. You need to start practicing saying yes, Mom. Now would be good. Beverly lost feeling in her hand because her grip was so strong. It came out as more of a sob than a statement, but she understood it as though she'd shouted it. Why? Yes, Mom. She wandered through the house as she basically cleaned out her closets and dresser drawers. It took them 4 trips to get all the stuff in the car, filling the trunk and most of the back seat. You have a beautiful house, but it doesn't feel like Dave's. This feels warm, you know. Beverly did know. You're exactly right. I've lived in the cold long enough, baby. That's why we're selling it. I plan to never spend another night there. I find I love being warm. They came back with her car stuffed. Ari and Dave came out with her in his arms, and Dave asked Beverly why she didn't take her truck. She slapped his arm playfully. Now you bring that up? We'll use it next time. Think about what you'd like for dinner while we unpack. Dave thought he impressed Bev when he made a simple stir-fry using chicken breasts, zucchini, carrots, ripe bell peppers in yellow and red, onions, mushrooms, and chopped Brussels sprouts. He served it over rice with a surprise. He'd taken parfait glasses, chopped up some tomatoes of different colors into little chunks, added basil leaves, and blended them with olive oil and a touch of vinegar. It was a very nice visual. Ari would have just eaten tomatoes if they'd let her. She had a bit of a temper tantrum and got her first experience with parental controls. Ari, do you want to grow up to be as pretty as your sister? Ari wondered where this was going, but she nodded her head. Then you have to eat different foods. You'll like what this tastes like. It has a whole lot of things you already like mixed together. Taste a spoonful. Beverly took a small spoonful and fed it to her like a baby. Her eyes grew wide and she smiled. More. Dave took a shot at the parenting thing. That's more, please. And you should say thank you to Beverly for helping you learn something new. She looked at Beverly and smiled. More, please. She ladled a little onto her plate with shaking hands and looked like she was going to burst with pride when Ari grabbed her hand. Thank you. The meal over, Bev took Ari to clean her up while Marcia banished Dave to the living room. Ari came back in, bathed and in pajamas, and crawled onto his lap. They watched a DVD Beverly had purchased while they were out, which was the movie Frozen, and Ari managed to stay awake for most of it. It became her favorite movie, and they must have watched it 1,000 times over the years. Marcia walked next door and was back in just a few minutes. Grandpa is gone and the door is locked. Beverly could see the steam coming out of his ears and put a hand on his shoulder. She grinned at Marcia. "Good thing we got you those pajamas then. Go get ready for bed." Marcia bathed and came out in shorty pajamas that showed a lot of leg but were conservative enough. Beverly grinned at his expression. "Only one of them is a little girl, honey." They were all in bed by 10, and both of them had to work in the morning. Beverly came out of the bath in a sexy little baby doll that did her figure justice. She saw Dave watching and twirled. His eyes went wide when he saw there were no panties. She giggled. "It comes with panties, but I figured it would be a waste of time to put them on. You, sir, are 5 months behind on your husbandly duties, and I expect you to make up some of it tonight." Then she got quiet and said in a small voice, "That is, if you want to." He stood up and slipped the gown over her head. "In my opinion, you wasted time putting anything on. I love you, Beverly." Just like that, her amorous mood vanished. She was too overcome with emotions to be aroused anymore. He still loved her. He started kissing her, stroking her body in his familiar way, and she melted. It didn't take long for the fire to return. He was surprised when she grabbed a pillow. "It's to scream into, baby. You know how much I enjoy making love to you and how loud I can get. We have children in the house, and I don't want to wake them, so I'll be biting this pillow a lot tonight." "I hope so, anyway." She didn't know how many times she bit down, but it was enough to put a hole in the pillow. She was glad pillows were pretty cheap, but if it cost her half her salary a week, it would be worth it. Their alarms were set, but Ari decided she would be their wake-up call. She was glad now that she made Dave put his boxers on and had slipped her gown on, with the panties this time. They snuggled her for a while until Marcia appeared and took Ari while they showered and dressed. They played with each other a little, but they couldn't get serious because of time constraints. Marcia had cooked breakfast, and they sat down to eat as any family in suburbia would. Ari insisted on a kiss goodbye, and they also kissed Marcia on the cheek, not wanting to leave her out. Marcia had a driver's license, so she took Beverly's car and dropped Dave off so they didn't have to swap the car seat. Beverly drove Dave's truck to work. Jen burst into the office 3 minutes after Beverly was seated. "Does that truck belong to who I think it does?" She couldn't help grinning. "It belongs to my husband, if that's what you're asking. Now, go to work, nosy Nelly. We'll talk at break." She bounced through the door 5 minutes early, bearing coffee and pastries. Beverly refused to say a word until they had their snack and were sipping their coffee. "Dave and I are back together, Jen. We have things to work out, and counseling will probably be involved, so I may miss a few hours now and then. It probably won't be as easy as I'd like, and there will probably be times when I'm depressed and snappy, but bear with me. I know I've probably never told you, but you're my rock here in the office. I'm most likely going to lean on you more than usual. That being said, I have approval to raise your salary 7%. It's not a lot, but it's the best I can do. Thank you for standing by me." Jen was both elated by the news and saddened deeply. Her husband had just gotten a promotion and would be transferring to another state in 3 months. He was given the news Friday. His company had also helped line some referrals up for her, and she was flying out next week to spend a day doing interviews. They were both crying as she told her the news. "I still have 11 more weeks, boss. I'll help you find someone new, someone who will be as loyal as I am." They hugged and went back to work. She thought about it on the way home, and as she pulled into the drive, it hit her. Marcia. She talked it over with Dave, and he thought it was an excellent idea. Ari was a bundle of energy, loving on both of them. She gave her a bath, sat down and read her a story while she rocked her gently to sleep. She passed her off to Marcia and got comfortable on the couch while they waited, snuggled up under Dave's arm. She came back downstairs and they called her over to them. "Marcia, could you sit a moment? We have some things to discuss with you. First, how come you're still here? We care a lot about both of you, honey. You know that, right? You can tell us anything."